I told you I smelled a sweep from Adam Chernoff, Right Angle Sports last week. A 3-0 weekend gets you right back to water level. I want to get to the best bet, one of those this week that we'll get to at the very end. But you and I talked last week about the power ratings and your numbers for the NFL. And you said Kansas City was still your number one team. The NFC, I think, is a different conversation. We know that San Francisco is the cream when it's healthy. We also have a charging Detroit, a rising Minnesota, and a banged up Philly team. So my question to you, Adam, to kick things off, what's 1, 2, and 3 in your NFC numbers right now?
San Francisco 1, Detroit 2, Green Bay 3. I think it's a pretty straightforward and easy answer. Like last week was, it drew some controversy on social media. But Sam, I want to just explain like a bit of process here. So a lot of folks will look at power ratings as backwards looking. What has happened to where we are, and let's rank the teams. Those are standings. If we're looking at power ratings, we got to look at what is going forward. The easiest way that I like to do that is think about teams in ranges from 0 to 100, and that's where they get placed in the ratings. But the general rule of thumb is that over the course of a season, a team will play 10 games to who they really are. They'll overperform in 3 to 4, and they will underperform in 3 to 4. And so the reason last week I didn't have Buffalo number 1, so I'm like, we've seen arguably 2 overperforms against a bad schedule. The reason I have San Francisco number 1 is I don't believe we've seen a true overperform yet, and they've been dealing with injuries. I mean, this is a team that's still picking up steam effectively with everyone getting back and healthy. The reason I have Detroit number 2 is because of where they started preseason. And again, we really haven't seen a true overperform. Maybe against Seattle, you can argue the offense got right, but that's a team that's been winning in spite of everything I've been reading about how bad the play calling has been. And then number 3 for Green Bay, I mean, I know we haven't seen an overperform from them this season, and now Jordan Love is back. And so I have a hard time looking back at teams and downgrading them significantly when there's been injuries or performances that are uncharacteristic of who they are, because that's going to lead you to bad betting spots. And so to me, Minnesota through 4 weeks, they've been great. It's a well-coached team. It's awesome. I get it. They've upgraded a lot. Let's think about where they were to start the preseason, and now they're certainly in the top 5 category in the NFC. But like, how many overperforms have we seen from Minnesota so far? I think at least a couple. So it's about who these teams really are when it comes down to ratings, and that's how I look at it.
I love your point about the middle and then the high and the low. And I used to call college basketball at UIC. We had 30 games, give or take a year. And I always thought 20 was the middle. You'd play 5 A games and 5 DF games. And that's sort of what you came to with your, analogy in the NFL. And I think it's very, very valid. I do want to ask you about a game in the AFC, though. We just talked NFC. Let's talk AFC and then a best bet. This game is fascinating. And my editors at Fox are all over this one. That's 457 Buffalo at 458 Houston. And you have a Buffalo team that just got absolutely pounded on Sunday night. Everybody watched it. I have a feeling that was the dog with fleas behind the counter in Vegas. A lot of public money on Buffalo, and that's okay. Baltimore wins big. Now Buffalo has to go on the road to face a Texans team that hasn't covered yet. There are so many different ways that we could break this game down, but what's most important to you? Buffalo, basically a 1-point favorite at Houston.
Your editors could have picked any other game and got a lot more talking points out of me. So unfortunately, this one is tough. But look, I know a group that played and released Houston +1, and I've seen Buffalo taken back at +1 as well. And we know 0 in the NFL means nothing. So the fact that there's disagreement at 1 on each side, I mean, it tells you all you need to know about this game. In terms of Buffalo getting beat up by Baltimore, that is a 1-of-1 unique matchup that made the Bills look like a team that they absolutely are not, because the Bills have injuries up and down the spine of their defense. Baltimore is as well equipped to take advantage of that as any team in the league. So Houston is not going to beat Buffalo in the same way that Baltimore did. They don't have the personnel for it. So that's kind of an outlier game for the Bills defense. The Bills defense, their corners have been great all season, and they're overperforming, and they look fantastic. It's better than we could have ever expected. Matches up fairly well against the Houston Texans wide receivers. The big question is this going to be another Stroud game against zone defense, which he's absolutely destroyed his entire career? What is the curveball for the Buffalo Bills? McDermott and Babbage have been awesome in games where they have to come up with a very specific game plan, even amid injuries. And this is going to be more of a scheme win for the Bills if they win and cover that they can coach themselves into and play up to. They're not going to be limited by physicality like they were against the Ravens. So it's a much different scenario. I have no bet on the game. I have no take. I wish you all the best having to write a story about this one because it is split right down the middle with respected money on both sides. I think it's a true coin flip in every sense of the word.
I think at the end of the story, I'm just going to write flip a coin, period, and hit submit because that's sort of how it feels.
It's tough.
Banner week for Chicken Dinner. You go 3-0. Kenny White goes 2-0. John Murray wins. I somehow moved to 4-0 with my best bet. It was just a banner week for the neighborhood, if you know what I mean. And you've got one this week at 4-4 through 8 selections. Where are you going? Where do you want to take us?
So I'll go with the Bears, and I'll say this. I'm looking at the screen. I see some cheap 4s. I see 3.5 at – can we talk about sports books on the show? Can we reference them by name?
Of course.
Okay, so I see Chris at 3 minus 115. I see Circa at 3.5 minus 110. Two of the sharper books in the entire industry. I think a fair grade, if that's okay, would be 3.5 minus 120. Go above Chris and Circa. Go below other sports books as well. We'll put that in there. If we get it landing on exactly 4, maybe we'll go push on the record. But I would be betting this at 3.5 minus 120. If you're looking at the other books, you got to buy down. That's fine. But I'll specify it at that one for those other sports books. I look at the Bears as an offense that is ascending week over week. They're starting to get things right. They found the ground game last week against a very bad Rams defense. They really want to prioritize the run game. They're going to get whatever they want on the ground this week as Carolina just lost middle linebacker number 1 and number 2. They're without their best defensive lineman and Derek Brown, who was hurt earlier in the year. They have other injuries in the defensive front and may again be without Shai Tuttle, their nose tackle. The Panthers have been toothless against the run, no matter who they've played all season. So the Bears have an offensive out in that regard. And I think we see Williams have his best passing game of the season. Said that a couple weeks ago, came true. I think he exceeds it in this spot. And this Bears defense has been quietly very good all season as well. And the upgrade on the Panthers with Dalton off of that Raiders win is getting them a ton of credit here that I don't necessarily buy into. And so I'm looking at the Bears here, 3.5 minus 120 would be my pick for the week. It is a very tough week 5, a very tight week 5, but that's one I'll go with.
Adam Chernoff, Right Angle Sports. We'll see you next week. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Sam.